Okay. And with that, I'd like to welcome everyone to our Emerge Medical podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jeff Brown, with my co-host, Dr. Jeff Cole. We've got a fantastic lineup for you today. We're talking to the creators of Entac Medical. This is a wearable AI device for predicting post-op ileus. With that, I would like to introduce you to Buddy Lyons and Dr. John Cromwell. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Jeff. We appreciate being here.
Absolutely. I'd first like to give you an opportunity to talk about the problem that Entac's addressing.
Yeah, so the problem that we're actually addressing, the company is actually sort of developed into something that we didn't intend to. So basically, we're a digital health company that applies predictive analytics and AI to acoustics in the body to predict certain adverse events of patients. We started out initially doing the original one for Privacy A, which is our recently launched device that does an assessment of gastrointestinal impairment risk in right now intestinal surgical patients. We've just filed an application to expand that into abdominal surgery as well. And what the device does is it predicts, we can't really use the word predict because it's not in the label. It does an assessment of the risk at post-op 12 for a patient who's going to develop gastrointestinal impairment 2 to 7 days after surgery. So we're going to tell the surgeon at post-op 12 if their patient's going to develop gastrointestinal impairment. That gastrointestinal impairment could be the result of a post-operative ileus, or it could be the result of a small bowel obstruction. Most of those, the overwhelming majority, about 94% of those, are post-operative ileus patients. The others are mostly small bowel obstructions patients. The significance of that is that right now there are a couple of different ways that surgery is done, in the U.S. and the EU, developed countries, is enhanced recovery after surgery protocol, which most board-certified colorectal surgeons do practice ERAS, where they do, in post-operative care, they do early oral refeeding and early discharge. The problem with that brings is that with post-operative ileus, the patient's going to be sick 2 to 7 days from now with, nausea and vomiting and distended abdomen and pain, it's driving a readmission rate of 20% or over in that patient population. There are surgeons who do surgery who do not use ERAS. They do more conventional delayed oral refeeding, where they'll not feed a patient until there is some sign of of GI function returning to normal, which they use, like passing of gas or bowel movement in order to determine that. The problem with that is it's not really perfect. I mean, a patient could have a bowel movement on post-op day 3 and still develop an ileus on post-op day 6. But they do delay the oral refeeding, then they feed the patient, and then they hold the patient for several days and make sure they're tolerating the diet. That means that the length of stay in 70 to 80% of their patients is, 3 to 5 days longer than it needs to be. So neither one of these are really addressing the issue very well. It's suboptimal care and very costly care with regard to dealing with this patient population.
How big is the need, and how is that measured?
Well, if you look at abdominal surgery, in the U.S., for instance, there are about 2.5 million abdominal surgeries done in the U.S. that we believe are medium to high risk for developing a post-operative ileus. And in Europe, in the EU in total, there's about 3 million of those. So it's not a trivial number of patients that go through this, and we're spending a ton of money on readmissions and holding patients in the patients longer in what is relatively a relatively small patient population in the U.S., about 2.5 million people. And so with Privacy A, we can reduce both of those. We can tell the physician if the patient is at risk for gastrointestinal impairment, whether they do ERAS or they do conventional surgery. That will tell them what to do in their post-operative feeding protocol, whether the patients can successfully be refed within 24 hours of surgery.
So our initial indication, label indication is in intestinal surgery. And Buddy mentioned the larger problem in intestinal surgery, we know that the risk of ileus or the prevalence of ileus is somewhere between 15 and 30%. In our clinical trials, it's around 21% in the centers where we're doing it, and that's where those numbers come from. That 70% of patients don't need to be spending additional time in the hospital because they're not going to develop an ileus.
Wow, I see. So you guys sort of touched on this already. You can expand on the question. The current standard of care is either you're doing the ERAS protocol, which I looked at one study, said it doesn't even work, or you can just delay feeding.
Yeah, let me speak to the standard for a moment. I'm a colorectal surgeon. For most colorectal surgeons, probably ERAS has become mostly the standard. ERAS is not just about early oral refeeding. It's a lot of other components, things like not routinely leaving a nasogastric tube in, using a narcotic sparing pain regimen, using multimodal analgesia. There's all sorts of facets to ERAS. The big component that we're trying to address here, though, is the big problem is that when you feed a patient after surgery, they can appear to tolerate it on the surface. They may not show any signs of outward signs of ileus until they've been discharged home. They appear to be tolerating and discharged home. But this has a significant benefit for those surgeons who are not doing early oral refeeding and early discharge, in that we can tell them with a 95% confidence that that patient's not going to develop an ileus, or they will successfully be able to refeed. So they're not waiting, that time in the hospital. It's quite simple. The device is about a 3-inch device or so that's got an adhesive backing on it. So the way the label states that we use this is we put it on within an hour of surgery. So if the patient's done with surgery, it can be put on in the operating room, or probably more commonly just placed on the in the recovery room within that first hour, and the staff presses a button to activate it. That's all that needs to be done initially. The device then monitors non-invasively on the abdominal wall, monitors for that first 12 hours. It's measuring an acoustic biomarker in the GI tract. And at that 12-hour time point, it's able to produce a risk assessment, either high or low risk. It's binary, so that no one has to go in and try to interpret any kind of numbers or anything like that. And this can easily be protocolized into a post-op protocol, so that if they're low risk, they would advance to a diet as chosen by the surgeon or the surgical team. If they were high risk, you may delay early oral refeeding until another time. And then after 12 hours, the device can simply be removed, and we have a program to recycle it that we may get into later.
That's awesome. So I looked at the pitch deck, and it looks like, in a nutshell, the business model is that you can save hospitals just a staggering amount of money, and by decreasing admissions and, of course, improve patient care. Buddy, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, really, we have a very extensive budget impact model that we had developed by a third-party health economics firm that goes through all the variables that dealing with how it impacts the budget of a hospital. And, there are lots of things in there. It's the number of bed days saved, the opportunity revenue for putting extra patients in those beds, the reduction in post-operative monitoring costs, and all these other things.
Right.
But what it really boils down to is there's two benefits really that involved in that. One of them is the reduction in readmission rates, and that's a clinical benefit. Not so, readmissions are a complicated question when it comes to reimbursement. The hospital will get another payment for that readmission. The problem is that they do get penalized for high readmission rates, right? Right. So to capture those dollar amounts is rather difficult. So we take the more conservative stance in our model and say, okay, we can reduce your readmissions by, and a good number for that is by, say, an average of 43% or more. But you're going to get an extra payment, so so that's not in our value prop really. The reduction in readmissions and we know that there are a lot of high profile academic centers who, some of them are in our current clinical trial, who have higher readmission rates, who will pay just to reduce that readmission rate, because it's not a good look if you're a premier when you've got a high readmission rate. But the real savings really comes from a couple of areas. It's really about bed day saved. So we're going to save you so much per day on that.
Right.
And when we look at places like Mayo Clinic or Cleveland Clinic, who were in our trials, you know, we typically end up saving them somewhere between $5 and $6 million with that. And that's the ROI on that versus the cost of the device is usually something like 8 to 12 to 1. Yeah.
Buddy, what can you say about market size and your forecasts, that arena?
Yeah. So, you know, the list price of the device is $795. You know, the average selling price is really about $600. So if you look at that and you look at the U.S. market, you know, the potential in abdominal surgery, you know, for the total addressable market is quite large. I mean, it's you know, it's a couple of $1 billion, and it's a little bit more than that even in Europe because the population's a little bigger. And we do have IP issued in both the U.S. and Europe. Asia we are actually looking for partners in Asia. We have people who are interested in using this in Asia, although we can't get really great data out of Asia. I mean, I would say that if you had to pick a number, maybe you say it's $6 billion globally with regard to just using it in gastrointestinal impairment. And that's just using abdominal surgery. So there are other pockets out there where there's even more surgery. I mean, cystectomies in men, they have a gastrointestinal impairment rate well over 30%. It's even higher than it is abdominal surgery.
Wow.
Gynecology, even in cardiovascular surgery, it's a small percentage of patients of like 5%, but there's data out there showing that if patients who develop a post-operative ileus who've had cardiovascular surgery increase their risk of mortality something like 13 times.
Is that right?
Yeah. So we're not really focused on all these sort of peripheral areas yet because we just launched PrevaCA, and we're, you know, the low-hanging fruit is in intestinal surgery and then abdominal surgery. But we think that it'll increase. And not only that, we haven't talked about this much. I think what will help us get into other types of surgery and it will make it more feasible is that we already have the second generation device called PrevaCA Gut, which is from a platform that John developed we call PrevaCA. It's an IoT wearables platform, acoustic IoT wearables platform that's even more accurate than PrevaCA is. And the more accurate the device is, the help, you know, the lower the ileus or GII rate you have to make it feasible to use that device. And so we'll probably start concentrating on some of these more peripheral markets once that's out. We're planning hopefully to file a 510K on that device in 2024. So it's right behind PrevaCA. What we're really doing with PrevaCA is preparing the market for something that can deal with this problem, and then coming right behind that with a sort of this new and improved version that's more accurate out of the box, number one, and number two, it's machine learning. So the performance of the device improves over time. So you have this ever increasing value prop over time. And the cost of the device to us to manufacture is a fraction of what the cost of manufacturing a PrevaCA device is. Because in PrevaCA, we do all the computation happens on the device. It's got a printed circuit board and all this stuff. It's got all this stuff on it. Everything with the PrevaCA Gut device is an IoT wearable. It's not in the cloud.
So I want to just make a point. You know, I'm an anesthesiologist. We're talking about this in the context of colorectal surgery, but you're making the point that this is really for anybody that's had a big surgery because they're all at risk but it's totally scalable. I mean, the hospital systems can order as many or as few as they want. They're not making a large capital commitment that says we're going to buy X number of these. We just decide what procedures they're going to go into, right?
Right. That's exactly right.
With that, what is your marketing strategy for US and Europe?
Yeah, in the US, it's, we're really trying to reach a small number of people. Relatively speaking, the US market, there are only 1,400 board certified colorectal surgeons in the United States. About 900 of those are attached to 425 academic centers, right? Mm. We're looking for an exit. I'm not looking to build an empire. And one of the things as we talk to strategics is that we have to demonstrate, obviously, is traction in the marketplace. It's not only how much, it's not only the dollar value, but who's using it. So we're concentrating on really mostly, not solely, but a lot of that is academic medical centers to try to get to a subset of these 900 board certified colorectal surgeons. Those are the people who are interested in research. Those are the people who are interested in doing an investigator-sponsored trial. Those are the people who ultimately set the standard of care, which filters out in the community, where there's with the general surgeons out in the community who do colorectal surgery. So those are the ones that we're predominantly interested in. And right now we have a trial going on that we call PREVICIA post-market trial. It's at 8 centers around the country, and most of them are academic centers.
And is the label going to be the same for both your stage 1 and stage 2 device, the Previs gut you're calling it?
Yes. The label, because we'll file a 510K on Previs AI gut, and it will have the same. It'll be used at the Previs A will be the predicate device for that device, and so it will get the same label as Previs A gut.
And does that label allow you to say it's prognostic, or does it allow you to just say, hey, we can reduce readmission rates and so forth?
The label actually says, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but just to give you a flavor for it, it actually says that it uses an acoustic biomarker called MH4 that assesses the risk of a patient developing gastrointestinal impairment during intestinal surgery. And that is and that's essentially what it does. But what in actuality what it does, it predicts that event is going to happen 2 to 7 days after surgery.
Well, you said the original device predicts with, what is it, 95% accuracy, Dr. Cromwell?
Yeah, well, we look the two important values we look at. One is the negative predictive value. That's so important because we want to be sure if the device says that there's a low risk of gastrointestinal impairment, the natural consequence of that is that the patient goes home. And so to avoid readmissions, we've tuned the thresholds to have a very high negative predictive value. And and then we look at sensitivity, obviously, because that allows us to capture those true positives. And we're working probably at 86% sensitivity, if I remember the numbers right. Yeah, as we bring in the AI version that's upcoming, all of the data, all of the audio data flows to the cloud platform, so we can aggregate all the data on the cloud. And awesome. There we can train, and we can come up with even better strategies for dealing with the audio using all of that data from nationally.
I'm always interested in the genesis. Can you take us back to this marker? I forget what you called it. Who discovered that? And the patent behind that? What was the aha moment behind all of this?
Yeah. Yeah, so I was at the University of Tennessee previously at the Health Science Center there. And, we sit in morbidity and mortality conference every week, listening to issues with patients. And one particular week, we had a number of patients who developed post-operative ileus, and several had aspirations and aspiration pneumonia and really sick, requiring ICU care, et cetera. And it struck me that there had to be a better way of segmenting patients who would or wouldn't really tolerate early oral refeeding. What I felt was that patients don't just go from having normal gut function to ileus in the course of a minute or something like that. There's this transition zone. And my feeling was that there had to be some features within the waveforms of the GI tract that would give us an indication of when a patient entered that transition zone. And so what we ended up doing was collecting a huge library of audio from patients who did and didn't have postoperative ileus, and developed a strategy, kind of like a DNA sort of discovery strategy, where we, instead of using restriction endonucleases to cleave the DNA and match it to certain clinical features, we used sets of digital filters and things like this to cleave up the audio spectrum and look at individual pieces of the audio spectrum and correlate those with clinical outcomes from that library of audio data. And we came up with a bunch of candidates. There were probably 6 major candidates that were acoustic biomarkers. We screened those again. It came down to this one called MH4, which is the one that ultimately made it into the device. We did a small 30-patient validation trial of that acoustic biomarker at the University of Tennessee, which showed unequivocally that it predicted post-operative ileus. And then we've just been on that same track since then, getting that algorithm embedded into the device called Previsier that we have today.
And since then, so we've gotten a couple of patents issued based on that IP, and then we've gotten another one's in play there on the commercial version of the device, and then of course we've gone on to get to file IP for Previsier as well.
So, you know, I want to dial it back just a little bit. We talked a lot about the company, but we haven't talked about either one of you. You each have impressive resumes. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourselves, your backgrounds?
John?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a double board in general in colorectal surgery. I've been an academic surgeon virtually my entire career. I trained at the University of Minnesota for the most part, and then held academic positions at Moffitt Cancer Center in Tampa. And then I was recruited to the University of Tennessee to start a new colorectal surgery program there, and then ultimately ended up here in Iowa, where I currently am at the University of Iowa. I have a background, well, I wear a number of different hats. I serve as an associate chief medical officer for the University of Iowa. I run an informatics digital health lab at the University of Iowa, which is where a lot of the IP that we work with comes from. I have a background in physical chemistry, which is the sort of the reason I got interested in modeling any of this kind of data in the first place, is just the experience from trying to model large biochemical molecules somehow translated into the work that we do.
That's great. How about you, buddy?
So I'm actually, by training, I'm an equity analyst, and I was an analyst on the street. I was a biotechnology analyst on the street, and then and prior to that, I was a buy-side analyst. I read about $5 billion in healthcare money for what was then Wachovia Asset Management, and that's how I got in the healthcare thing. And then, 2005, I left the investment business and started helping some companies do some things to get some product to market. You think you learn a lot when you're looking at companies, and you think you learn a lot about clinical trials and intellectual property and marketing.
Until you go do it.
You really know nothing until you go do it.
Right.
But anyway, so I got involved in a biopharma startup, and then this opportunity came along with this technology, and I formed the company and immediately gave a piece of it to John because I knew I could not do this without him. And since then, John's developed other technologies. We have evolved as a company. We thought we were going to do this one thing, and then we were going to sell this company to somebody and make a lot of money and go lay on a beach somewhere. Well, I was. John was. I don't think John will ever give up working, but I was. But along the way, John's developed other technology, and that's when Previsier came along. And Previsier is interesting in the sense that not only does it give us the second product to, the Previsier, and it's more accurate, and machine learning with continuously learning, it also gives us the opportunity to move into other areas. And so John has been collecting data on people for heart and lung applications, and we recently got some initial data on that with regard to being able to distinguish heart and lung function using sound. And I think that what we want to demonstrate, we believe that in the next couple of years that there'll probably be an exit for the company. So while we have this company, and as long as we can do it in a cost-effective way that is not, dilutive to shareholders tremendously, is to develop Previsier into a platform. And right now, this collection of data that John's doing now is going to be the first step in demonstrating that we can do something in sort of like predicting a bronchospasm in an asthma patient in an IoT with an IoT wearable, or predicting decompensation in CHF. The reason that we think that, there's a lot of stuff going on in CHF and remote monitoring. The problem with that, a lot of that stuff is it's implantable type things, sensors and vessels and things like that. this will be completely non-invasive. And, you know, the fact of the matter is that 70% of patients who have a CHF go into a hospital and never see a cardiologist. And after that, only about 19% of them are referred up the chain. And so these people are taken care of by hospitalists, internists, you know, their family practice doctors, their local internists and things like that. And we believe that we can believe cutting edge technology of those people to be able to predict those events, to prevent hospitalizations. And it's a very similar story in asthma, with there's 25 million asthma patients in the U.S. And we believe it's a very similar story where we can predict that event from happening. The patient can do whatever their physician tells them to do. That maybe, you know, take your albuterol or your steroids or whatever, or call my office or what, to prevent that. So we've got a first step going on in there. I think we've got some interesting data coming out probably by the end of this first half this year or in the third quarter. That is a real first step toward being able to do that. And we just saw some of the first data the other day, and it's very interesting data. So we really evolved over the years. And by the time we get this company, you know, ready for an exit, I want to be able to offer someone a platform where you can develop product. And I don't think we'll ever bring a heart and lung product. I mean, if we end up having the company long enough, we will, but I just don't think we'll have the company long. But where we want to get it to is we want to get it to prototype and solid data, and then let somebody else in an exit. But we want to be able to add value to that exit price with the technology that we have, and that's what we're working toward doing. The
AI platform that we've developed in the same vein as Buddy was talking about gives us a very consistent ability to rapidly prototype devices that depend on audio for multiple applications. And it allows us to have a consistent way of analyzing that data, whether it's a heart data, lung data, whatever. Once it reaches the cloud, we can pipe it through any algorithm that we need to and have a very consistent way of doing it. And if it involves, you know, a patient having a handheld device to monitor their lung function or their heart function, that's really simple to add to a cloud-based platform. And so it really is a consistent and rapid development platform that adds value.
I was going to ask, I want to make sure I understand and our viewers understand, you've developed, or there you know of acoustic biomarkers that are predictive of CHF, asthma, COPD.
Much like with ileus, we believe that there's transition zones for patients that have compensated disease, whether it's in heart disease, congestive heart failure, if it's in asthma or COPD. And we're really interested in identifying the audio features that allow us to understand that they're in the process of decompensating, but doing it as early as possible. And so we're in the stages. We believe we have the data that suggests we can develop these things within just in the same manner as we've done with Previs AI gut. The same way for these other organ functions. And there are some big gaps in the market that Buddy was just talking about. The problem is, as he was saying, that people have focused on cardiologists and heart disease, and they focused on pulmonologists and lung disease. And I think it's been, when you look at, for instance, congestive heart failure, there are other non-invasive devices out there, but what they tend to do is they predict very late, non-invasively predict late consequences of decompensation. You know, things like when patients are getting pulmonary edema or they're massively swelling or things like that. That's the horse is out of the barn at that part, and that's probably going to require them to go back to the emergency department. We think that there is a gap in the market, and we have an ability to understand much earlier in that process when decompensation is happening. Patients need a lead time if we're going to avoid readmission. They need a lead time to get in touch with their caregiver to understand what they can do other than come to the emergency department to manage their disease. And we think that if we can find decompensation through the use of acoustic biomarkers in this way, that we can help this population of patients who aren't, being invasively monitored or, things like that.
Yeah, on that topic, I want to make a little distinction for you and your audience with regard to the technologies.
Sure.
Privacy A is not an AI product. Privacy A is what we call feature engineering, because we're looking for a particular feature. We're looking for MH4, right? And we're quantifying that. The AI product is totally different. There aren't acoustic biomarkers that we're looking for. And John, you might want to sort of further explain that about how the AI works versus, because that's a little bit, there are different products.
Yeah. So everything beyond Privacy A is an AI-based product, and so we're, instead of looking at one feature of audio, which is what we're doing in Privacy A, we're looking at virtually an infinite number of features within the audio spectrum. And so we create a machine learning based fingerprint of that audio, and we can, which is multiple features, hundreds or thousands of features rather than a single acoustic biomarker. And by fingerprinting that audio data using machine learning, we can segment audio that we get from a patient into very specific clusters, and understand when patients are moving from one zone of risk to another zone of risk based on the fingerprint in that audio, if that makes sense.
It does. So do you envision something like a patented software package that you could maybe put on, say, someone's phone, which would go into their pocket and be listening to these biomarkers that you will identify? Maybe I'm getting ahead of what you're doing, but
you're making a good point. Yeah. So it depends on the clinical scenario. Previs AI Gut is meant for use in a hospital, and so that device will have its own cellular communication without needing someone's smartphone or anything like that. It'll communicate directly with the Entac cloud platform. But on the other hand, for a device for monitoring lung function or heart function as a patient that's not in the hospital, a smartphone is a really great application for use here, because it already serves as a cellular gateway.
Right.
And we can really minimize the size of the device. One of the things that's important to us is making sure that we have a very low profile device that's easier for a patient than doing spirometry every day if they're an asthmatic, or it's easier than them weighing themselves every day if they're a congestive heart failure patient. They slap it on, and the data is moving through their smartphone into our cloud platform, where we can provide access to caregivers or to the patient themselves, and they have access to it on their smartphone as well. So the smartphone would be a component of some of these technologies that are used in the outpatient setting.
That's awesome.
And a lot of that technology with regard to the cloud portion of it has already been developed with Previs AI Gut. It sort of allows us to do that rapid development we're talking about, because we needed all those things to do Previs AI Gut, although it's an in-hospital, it's an in-hospital device. A lot of the cloud infrastructure and everything that we do has already been created. So we don't have to recreate all those things to make this work. What we're doing now is John's looking at data and gathering the data, putting together the machine learning algorithms to do it, and then we create hardware to go along with that, the sensor on the chest and the phone. But most of the stuff that we need to go into the cloud has already been, we've already developed that, and we know it works already.
Well, this is fascinating. The Merge Medical podcast, multi-pronged purpose, if you will, introducing people to interesting ideas, interesting founders, solutions that physicians can work into their own, solving problems within their own practice, and then investment opportunities as well. Do you guys?
We do have a capital raise going on, by the way. We didn't mention that, but we do have one.
I was going to get to that here at the end. Just that is one of the the multi-pronged purposes of this, and I think our listeners, the members in our community, they're all different. They have different needs, talents, and some may be interested in the capital raise component. Others might be colorectal surgeons, and this might be, incredibly interested for their clinical practice. So what can you talk about your capital raise and where you are in that?
Yeah, so this year we're doing, we have a lot of milestones coming very quickly, lots of them just coming very quickly. And it didn't make sense to do a priced round right now, because we because the milestones, we believe that you're very, very substantially increase the valuation of the company. So what we're doing is a convertible note, and we're doing it sort of in two tranches. It'll be basically two notes, but the first note is just $1 million. And then what that $1 million does, it basically funds the company until we get through some more milestones, right? That we've already got like $600,000 of that in the door, but we've got a little bit more capacity left. So far, about $400,000 that we've got left is available. So we'll do that, and we're going to continue to move through milestones. Those milestones are things like starting to generate revenue in the second half of the year, right? Getting some data from getting Prevacay gut further along and getting beta units for that. Data from the heart and lung program. Those all things that we believe will increase the valuation of the company. Then as we move through that, that's just providing us some runway. We'll do another up to $3 million. And I think by the time that we get ready to do that second, the up to $3 million portion of the note, we'll know exactly how much we're going to do. It just really just depends on what the initial uptake of Prevacay is in the market and how much revenue is generated. But that'll be in the second half of the year sometime. And the issue is this, and the first $1 million has already been priced at a $12 million cap. It's a 20% discount into a priced round, the next price round with a $12.5 million cap. We believe that's the last best place to get in, because we believe that some of these other milestones starting to generate revenue and moving Prevacay gut along and heart and lung data will substantially increase that for that $3 million. So
if I could summarize, you've got a device that saves the hospital money. It decreases morbidity and mortality, improves patient care. And we didn't even talk about the fact that you've got a green solution where the devices are reused. You're moving towards a platform that will quite possibly be predictive of COPD, CHF, asthma. You're moving towards a cloud-based platform with your second stage device. Am I saying that all correct, buddy? Did I?
That's pretty much all correct, Jeff.
So I can't, I can't understand why a hospital administrator or any physician wouldn't be interested in this. It's really a no-brainer.
It really is, but it's just cutting through the clutter. We're not the only company out there selling devices. Now we're the only ones selling them in this space. We don't have any competition in this space, right? We're the only people out there, and it's just a matter of time. So, there are some variables here, like for the post-market sites, we have to wait till that trial ends to go in there and sign them as contracts. Now, we've already got several commitments from PIs at those who want to take this through value committee. We've already got those, but you have to get on the value committee calendar. Sales cycle in the hospital post-COVID is about 6 months. We've started that process in a lot of these hospitals already. So we believe that we'll have all 8 of those on as customers, sometime in the second half of the year, plus others where we have started that process of moving them toward value committees to get them in. We still got to go through a value committee, and that's the real bottleneck is getting on the calendar and then getting through. But you got to convince the physician that he wants to use it, get that physician to take it to the value committee. Get on the calendar, and then you can do it. So it's just the sales cycle that's really the issue.
There is this is a new class of device. There's really nothing out there that does acoustic biomarkers or anything, and so the educational lift is rather large as we get out with hospitals and everything, because we're not selling just a newer, cheaper stapler for use in GI surgery or something. This really is a new class that requires education. So I think that's a lot of the lift.
So, buddy, I want to ask you about a specific slide that's in the pitch deck, and maybe we would start the podcast with this. This says it's the annual economic impact of Previs EA. This says $6.9 million for a hospital with 444 Medicare discharges and 584 non-medical discharges. Tell me what that means real simply.
So that means by using the product in every one of those patients, you should be able to generate cash flow through cost savings of $6.9 million, basically. Is what that means.
We need a drum roll after that.
We do. I wish I could, because you and like I said, most of that, if you look at it, there's a summary portion. If you add up everything and you just take the bed day save piece and the revenue opportunity, that's the bulk of it, is the bulk bed day saves. Plus, on that slide, the other important piece of it is, I believe it says a 43% reduction in readmissions, right? Does it say that somewhere on that slide?
It does.
And that is hugely attractive to a lot of places, even though they know. But you'll notice that if I gave you the detailed portion of the model there, the portion that they're losing on the readmissions is trivial with regard to a huge reduction in readmissions.
But they're getting dinged on the quality metric.
Right, exactly. They're getting dinged on a quality metric, but they're paying a little bit for that. But it's being overwhelmed by the remainder of the cost savings, because most of these patients are Medicare patients. There's lots of Medicare, and it's a DRG-based space.
Right.
So they're getting flat payments to pay for this. And so every day we save them, and there should be the number of bed days saved around on that slide somewhere too, Jeff. So we tell every hospital all of that. This is how many bed days we can save you. This is your readmission. How we can reduce readmissions, and this is the cash flow. And then the ROI on that is probably something like 9 to 1 or something like that, based on the cost of the device.
We've covered a lot. Either one of you, I'd like to give you an opportunity to talk about anything that you think we haven't covered at this time.
John?
Well, there's one more piece that might be worth just briefly mentioning, which is there's a big problem with coding of post-operative ileus in the hospital setting. And the PREVIS EA sort of raises the awareness of post-operative ileus, but we've put together a companion program for hospitals that are customers that allows us to come in and help with the documentation piece around post-operative ileus. We did a small study at the University of Iowa looking at the opportunity. We found that about 38% of ileus cases were not actually coded, and post-operative ileus results in a bump in the DRG triplet when it's documented appropriately, not in every patient, but about 1 in 5 patients, if they would have captured the code, would have been bumped up to a higher DRG triplet, and so the inaccuracy in coding around ileus and gastrointestinal impairment in the post-operative phase is costing hospitals money as well. And so we're able to actually give them hard revenue with the companion program.
So it's called PREVIS CDP, PREVIS Clinical Documentation Program. And we had this developed by a health economics firm. I mean, because you can't go in and coach to code. We're not going in and saying we're promising you more revenue. What we do is we go in, because we know it's undercoded everywhere by a massive amount, is we go in and say, we have a peer-reviewed paper from John's study at Iowa, and hand them that and say, here's a place where actually it was not coded properly, and you can see what happened. And so what we're offering them is just the opportunity to go in and provide them with materials and education for their clinical documentation and improvement experts and their coders to be able to improve their coding practices as a part of PREVIS EA, because PREVIS EA does raise the awareness of post-operative ileus. And if that thing says it's a high-risk patient, there's a 94% chance that it's going to be a post-operative ileus, and the remainder of a chance it's going to be a small bowel obstruction. You get to increase the triplet to get more revenue, and that's what we're helping them do, is to get more justifiable reimbursement for the care that they're already providing. But we just go in and tell them we're going to help you more accurately code for this.
So and this doesn't cost the hospital anything extra. This is just
someone doesn't cost them a thing.
Well, it's definitely compelling. I think you guys are really onto something. I think you're gonna help a lot of people, and you're gonna save a lot of money, and you're gonna make some money for yourselves. So it's really a win-win-win. That's what we're looking for. This is perfect for our mission. There's some altruistic reasons that Jeff and I do this. We thank you for coming and joining us here for the Merge Medical Podcast. I'm Dr. Jeff Brown, your host, with my co-host, Dr. Jeff Cole. Thanks for joining us.